Hello everybody, Dave Howard here. Tyson's in here again joining us, and this is another one of our small series that we're doing on unmasking the truth. And as we promised in previous videos, we're going to continue to bring information to you. There's been a lot of reports, they report them as well. We did the scientific study and we tested this or we tested that. And so we're digging into these things, not for the purpose of trying to embarrass anybody. I'll make sure we clarify that, but we're trying to get to the truth. We really want to know where the decisions are they basing them on science, or are they basing them on a faith objective? Are they trying to find a way to justify their belief? So we're going to go through another study today, and something that came to my attention recently is somebody said, well, you guys never claim you're anti-maskers, but you sometimes sound like you are. We're not. We believe in the hierarchy of controls. I think we've made that very clear. And I hope everybody understands that when it comes to a requirement for PPE, when we know there's a necessity for somebody to wear any level of PPE, that means an appropriate job hazard analysis has been done. We have identified exposures. We've taken every measure possible to eliminate that hazard. Then we go to, when nothing else can happen, then we go to PPE. And if we decide, hey, we're going in this environment, we need respirators, we're the first ones to put them on.
Absolutely.
Because we know that when they're used correctly and for the right reason, they work. So with that said, I'm going to turn over to Tyson. Tyson, you dug into another one of those studies that was out, and I don't remember if it was on the CDC website or where this one came from.
This is directly on the CDC's website.
Wow. Let's get into this because I think everybody's going to be really interested to see what you found out.
Yeah, and just to reiterate what Dave says here is that the question here that we're trying to answer isn't, do masks work? Because as PPE, as we know, as experts in recommending this,
correct,
if it's utilized correctly, it will work. All right. What we're trying to understand here is, do masks work beyond the scope of their design?
Correct.
Which is what's being recommended continuously in the public sphere. So this study that I wanted to dig into, this is a core study, and that's being utilized by the medical profession to make the claims that masks protect people.
Okay.
All right. So this is now they're saying that it does something outside the scope of its design, and I'm talking about masks, not N95s. Those are respirators. So those two different forms of PPE. We need to make sure we separate those two in this discussion.
Correct.
So this study, the title of the study is a quantitative method for comparative assessment of particle removal efficiency of fabric masks as alternatives to standard surgical masks for PPE. So they're trying to determine if masks can perform as PPE. Now, I'll get into a little bit more of what I was going to go there with that one later. But this study was published by Amy Mueller, Matthew Eden, Jessica Oakes, Chiara Bellini, and Mueller-Fernandez. So these are the authors of this research. So what they did is they utilized port accounts, and we did fit testing in this office a few weeks, actually maybe a couple months ago. So that's in one of our previous videos that we did with Nathan. The port count is a great device. It's utilized to determine if something is going to provide respiratory protection for the wearer, and they use that, but they use them a little bit differently than what we would typically see for determining if something actually performs as personal protective equipment.
Correct.
And also you'll see on the CDC's website for the double masking recommendation, there's a person. They say other effective options include wearing a nylon covering over the mask. They came to this study, did that. So when you see that, this is the study that it's being referenced in that new recommendation by the CDC. But this is one of the top studies that they have. If you scroll down to the bottom of the page in the CDC's website for mask usage, you'll see this study as one of the top 3 studies that it uses.
So on that, what he's saying is, if you want to go check out what we're talking about, we're going to show it to you obviously through the video, but go check it out. Go do your own research, and we'd love to hear from you if you read something different in these reports.
Absolutely. So the first thing we get into, I want to talk about what's called a fit factor. Okay. All right. So fit factor is something that we utilize to determine if a face covering or face piece offers protection for the wearer. What's important to know is that it's a ratio. So fit factor is a number, it's a ratio of aerosols outside the mask and what's penetrating the mask, so where your leakage is. OSHA requires a fit factor of 100 for a half face piece and a fit factor of 500 for a full face piece. And basically what that number means, the 100, for example, means that the air inside your mask or inside your face covering is 100 times greater inside than outside.
Okay.
And OSHA has determined that as you have to have that minimum, hit that minimum standard in order for it to be considered safe for use.
Correct.
All right. And another highlight of this study is that they've used the percentages that were achieved in this study for doctors to now come out and claim, and I've heard it personally on the TV, radio, things like that. Doctors are coming out and saying that masks do achieve a fit factor. But in the study, they didn't sample any of the masks with trying to determine what the fit factor was. They were just looking at particulate efficiency. So, which to me doesn't make any sense for when you're trying to determine if something protects the wearer. But this is, again, I want to make sure that people understand that this is masks, not N95s, not respirators. Respirators are totally different. So the first finding, the port accounts that they utilized, they were not calibrated.
Really?
They didn't take their instrumentation in to make sure it was calibrated, make sure it was performing right. But what they did is they did daily calculations on the instruments. So they added the human element into it. So this downgrades your research when you do that. All right, so that's how they offsetted it. But in reality, when you're trying to use a higher tier of evidence in your research, you want to remove the human element as much as possible.
Correct.
Because human beings make a lot of mistakes, as we all know. So that's the first finding in this. The second finding was that they totally... So we have a... we talked about trying to achieve a fit factor, right? So there's, with the port account, instead of putting it into the fit test mode, they just did it into the count mode for particles, all right? I mean, if you want to do that to understand particle percentage, that's okay. But you're trying to determine if this can provide personal protective.
Yes, is it going to protect?
Is it going to protect the person, the wearer? So you would need to follow, it's 29 CFR 1910-135 App A. So there's a respiratory protection or respiratory fit test protocol, a legal requirement that we use, standard science, been around for a while. And I think what they did is they just kind of came up with their own methodology, and then they wanted to see it play out. But the reality is you don't need to reinvent the wheel. We have the science.
And we know what works.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's has long success in working for people. So that was the second finding. The third finding was that they, given the limited time and current social distancing precautions, they decided that they would have the subject breathe normally, only through their nose, and not move their head. So the third finding here is that they didn't follow Section 14 of the regulation of performing a fit test, which is, we call it the test exercises. So it's a simulation of normal body movement.
Correct.
So I guess because you're social distancing, you're not going to move your head, bend down and pick up groceries, and you're not going to talk out of your mouth.
Yeah.
So that's rigging the research.
Correct.
Right? Because that doesn't jive with any legal standing, any science standing. This is rigging the research. All right. Fourth finding, and fourth and fifth findings are very similar, because with PPE, you got to understand what the contaminant or the exposure you're trying to prevent. You got to understand what its functions for, how to use it, and then what the risks are with it. So in 29 Code of Federal Regulations, 1910-132, Section C, design. Design says all PPE shall be of safe design and constructed for the work to be performed. So finding 4 was that the masks were manipulated, so the person had to manipulate it as they were doing the particle counts to get those high efficiencies. So it wasn't constructed for the design.
Okay.
Right? They're trying to introduce, this is beyond surgical masks, this is also, they're doing cloth masks, different types of cloth masks. So they're introducing new forms of PPE into the populace. So they didn't do a risk analysis on that. So finding number 4 was that they manipulated the mask to justify the use. All right, so they didn't follow 29 Code of Federal Regulations, Section 1910-132, Section C. And so that is the design of PPE. That requires the PPE to be designed for safe use and also designed for purpose. All right, so they had to manipulate it so these masks, they were not designed for purpose, and also they didn't have a risk analysis done. That's finding number 5, to determine what the risks were so the person would know how to use them safely. All right, finding number 6 was they only used one test subject the entire time. And what's important about that is, as we know, people have different sizes of faces. Correct. So you have small, medium, large. They didn't do their testing on people of difference to determine a person who has a larger face. This would be the efficiency. Person with a medium-sized face, this would be the efficiency. Okay. And small and so on.
That makes sense.
Yep. So they didn't do that. And then because the equipment wasn't calibrated and they didn't adhere to the OSHA regs on how to basically determine if PPE is safe to use or properly used, and also how to perform a proper fit test, I wouldn't even put this at I have a hard time putting it at a level 4 in the hierarchy of evidence.
Wow. Okay.
So but that's the bottom level of science. So when you think about this, this study doesn't have the cloud that you would need to make public decisions off of. Okay. If you wanted to use this study to take it to the next level, that would be fine. But because they evaded so many different things in there, you can't make the claims that they're making on this. So the researchers, another thing that they did is they omitted the equipment not being calibrated. That's a huge issue on that, because that's an integrity issue with your study. Then they rigged the methodology to get the performances, the percentages that they wanted. So a surgical mask, I think, was 75% efficiency, and a cloth mask was 91%, but that's rigged data. And this is also being used to make the false claims that masks achieve a fit factor, and that using 2 masks is common sense. So. Wow. Yeah. So, as you're hearing, and again, if you go back and look at any of our previous videos, I think we've been pretty forthcoming on this. In fact, I know we have. We got to look at the data, and you can't just trust what people are telling you. You got to go look at this stuff, do your research, understand what it is. Now, we know that not everybody's an exposure scientist like Tyson, but it's like no real experts are being sought to assist anybody in getting to the bottom of this and what's really working, what's not working. So we're going to continue to look. We're going to continue to ask for information. We're going to continue to say to anybody, if you have different data or you would like to discuss any of this with us, we encourage you to get a hold of us. Our contact information is going to be along with this. Feel free to call us, and we would love to have the conversation, and we'll entertain anybody. But please do us a favor. Don't bring us your opinions. Bring us facts. Bring us information that we can establish through science. Absolutely. We'd love to have that challenge. Well, thank you again. We hope that you're enjoying the series that we're doing, and thank you, Tyson, for your continued research in this. Absolutely. And until next time, stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.